welcome to my channel. My name is Martine, and if you are new here, I do videos on Vedic astrology mainly, but also with some tropical insights, and I focus on both relationship and natal astrology. And if you like this video and you would like to see more content from me, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to my channel. Also consider clicking the notifications bell if you want to see when I will post a new video. Also, if you are interested in a private reading, I do readings in astrology on a variety of topics ranging from relationship readings to career to transits for 2-3 years, or solar return charts or predictions for 1 year, etc. You are free to email me at the email address that I will leave in the video description, and I can send you a pricing list and reading options and any other details that you might require. Also, I want to mention that I have started membership options on this channel, and the short of it, just to give you the short perks that you will get if you choose to join the membership section, you will get 1 extra video per month for each membership stage or tier. So for the first tier, you will get 1 extra video per month. For the second tier, you will get 2 extra videos per month, so you will have access to level 1 and level 2 videos. And for level 3 or third tier, you will get 3 extra videos per month. The level 1 and level 3 videos are going to be on a variety of topics, so basically anything related to astrology, but it will be content that is not shown on my regular usual videos, right? So this is members only exclusive content, and it can range from, tips and tricks on how to read a horoscope to, I haven't done this yet, but I plan on doing maybe members only astrological synastry for famous couples, for instance, or the analysis of famous people's horoscopes, but then I can also get into divisional charts, etc., etc. So all kinds of things. The level 1 or second tier of membership options is especially related to synastry astrology topics, meaning relationship-oriented astrology. So this could be things like how to discover which kind of partner archetype is right for you according to your horoscope, or it could be, again, different characteristics, whether you're going to have a good marriage according to your horoscope or a less than stellar marriage. But you can find more concrete examples in the lists that you will find in the video description, because I have added the playlists where you can already see all the videos that I have posted in each members section. So yeah, you can see what videos you will have access to from the ones that I have already done. But I will continue to post, like I said, 1 extra video per month for each level of membership. And in addition to that, in the members only section, you will have access to members only polls, and you will also have priority when it comes to getting your comments replied to on my channel. And you will also have stickers that basically show up next to your username that show that you are a member, and a couple of exclusive emojis. All right, so that's pretty much all the perks that you can have as a member on my channel. If you're curious, you can check the video description for more details as well, or you can click the join button under any of my videos to also see the prices, because the prices will be shown in your local currency. All right, in addition to the members only section, I also have a tarot channel, and I post there semi-regularly, and I will be linking the tarot channel in the video description as well as in the pinned comment. It's called Martine's Tarot. So if you are curious about tarot, if you're into it, maybe check out my channel, maybe subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much for listening to this intro. And now I'm going to get straight into today's topic. Hello and welcome to my channel. Welcome to another video from me. So today's topic is going to be on the synastry analysis of Prince Harry of Wales and Meghan Markle, because this is the couple that came out at the last poll that I left on my community page. And also, of course, I will remind you from the beginning that if you have suggestions for famous couples that you would like me to do a relationship analysis for, please mention them in the comment section. And I will mention this, as I have mentioned in the community post, that ideally both partners have to have a known time of birth. I would be willing to consider the situation where one of them does not have an official time of birth, but if both of them don't have a time of birth on record, I really don't think it is worth looking at, because the extent of the compatibility, the accuracy and detail of the compatibility will be significantly reduced. Okay. As I have mentioned, actually, even when it's just one partner that has a known time of birth, the amount of information that you can get from Synastry is significantly reduced. And of course, there are chances that because of that, the analysis will not be accurate in some way. Okay. However, if it is just one partner that has a known time of birth, I would still give it about an even, let's say, 70 to 80% accuracy, because there's still a lot of information you can get out of that. Okay. So let me get straight into it. I don't feel like I have to give too much of an introduction to this couple. Personally, I can't say that I have followed all of the drama around them. I do know that there is drama going on and has been surrounding them. Just the short of it, of course, Prince Harry, the son of Princess Diana, is, or was, the potential heir of the British crown. Well, one of them at least. There was never any, I guess, official naming of who would be King Charles's heir, but now I feel like Harry probably has just taken himself out of the race because he moved to the US. So it was this huge drama. And then, of course, Meghan Markle is an American actress and relatively, well, I wouldn't say relatively unknown, but she was not like a huge star anyway. So there are loads of videos and pieces of content about them online where they basically say that Meghan Markle is a narcissist who manipulated Prince Harry. Personally, based on what I have seen, I definitely think that that is a possibility, but like I said, I have not really followed them closely, have not really followed the evolution of their relationship closely. I have watched bits and pieces of the videos, you know, and even the ones that I found really interesting were the ones where you had body language therapists, or whatever they're called, like, I guess the people who do body language analysis. I know that there's this man on YouTube, his name is Jesus Rosas, I think. He does, I do remember seeing a video that he did about Meghan Markle and Prince Harry in some kind of a public situation, you know, at some public event. Well, I don't remember the analysis, but it was basically leading towards that same direction, saying that, you know, Harry is not looking particularly happy in the relationship and that she might be a narcissist, or at least a lot of people in the comments were saying that. So anyway, that's just a little bit of gossip, but I'm sure that those of you who wanted to see this video, you probably know a lot more than I do about what's going on between them. So suffice it to say, I'm not an expert on their relationship, but I am going to give my 2 cents over here just based on what I see in their horoscopes. All right. So I'm going to start with the classic, basically, individual horoscope inter aspects. Also overlays, another way to put them. Basically, what you have in the middle there with the blue are Prince Harry's placements, and towards the outside you have Meghan Markle's placements. So this is an easy way to basically see how her planetary placements are affecting his horoscope. So which planet falls in which house and what aspects are going on. So again, I have not looked at these horoscopes literally until now, so I'm just going to go with what I noticed first, and then move along with the, you know, in order of importance or in the order that I observed them. So first thing that stands out to me, literally first thing, all right, is the fact that we have a Lilith and Mars conjunction. So her Lilith is conjunct his Mars. Not surprising. Those of you who have seen my Lilith and Synastry video probably already know what I'm going to hint at, which is that this produces an extremely strong attraction. I don't think I have mentioned them as a famous couple example in that video, because I know I went over some famous couples in that video as well. So again, I'm going to be linking all of the relevant videos in the video description, so go ahead and check out the video description to see that video, because I do recommend it. But the short of it is that with the Mars, especially to the Lilith, this is a very strong physical attraction. It is usually felt from both sides, although I would still see it as the Mars person tending to be more fascinated with the Lilith person. So, and especially when it's the Mars to the Lilith, it's a very physical, very erotic sort of thing. It can bring a lot of like deep subconscious desires. And one of the things that I also mentioned in that video, and definitely applies to this case, is the fact that it actually brings people together that would normally have nothing to do with one another. You know, like the kind of couples where everyone around them is like, what the fuck? Pardon my French. As in the kind of couples that just look like they're from totally different universes, and, you know, they're on different wavelengths altogether, and yet somehow this aspect can produce such a strong attraction that it really pulls them together. And yeah, that's the thing that I see right off the bat, all right? Would definitely explain the mutual attraction. Like I said, especially from his side, a huge amount of fascination and no doubt physical attraction as well. Now, normally this aspect, as I have explained it in that video as well, as far as I have seen anyway, tends to produce a desire to control, especially from the man's side. So when the man is the Mars, he tends to want to control the Lilith person. However, to be fair, the couples that I have looked at in those situations, for the most part, were, I guess, older in age, part of different generations. So I would say maybe in these generations, considering the fact that, well, Prince Harry basically is a millennial as far as I know. He's born in 1984, so that makes him a millennial. Meghan Markle is born in 1981, so technically she's a Gen X, but they're definitely young, okay? They're young people, and so they have different mentalities with respect to gender roles and all that. Of course, Prince Harry also has all of that psychological, for lack of a better word, baggage that came with his mother having been Princess Diana, and the tragic end that she had and all that, because to a large extent, for those of you who don't know, it was rumored at the time, and it was a huge deal, that her death was caused by paparazzi. I actually also heard this as a parenthesis in a lot of video analyzes. What's the plural of analysis and analyzes? I have to look for this. Anyway, analysis, whatever. So I've seen a lot of video analysis where they actually point this out, that, you know, Harry has had this trauma about his mother's death potentially having been caused by the media, paparazzi hunting her down. So people are saying that Meghan Markle kind of knew how to exploit that as a vulnerability to and proceeded to victimize herself, you know, and make herself seem like, oh, poor me, you know, look, everyone hates me, Harry, please save me, that kind of thing, and that he somehow fell for it. So again, right off the bat, maybe I'm reading too much into it, so I'm going to move on to other potential aspects. But this definitely produces attraction. That's the main thing you want to remember. Moving on to another big cluster here is his Venus conjunct her Moon, Saturn, and Jupiter. I'm going to open another parenthesis over here. I don't think I have done, no, definitely haven't done a separate video about this. I actually have considered starting a series, but again, I have too many things going on at the same time. And those of you who have watched my channel, you probably know that I still haven't finished a lot of stuff that I have to finish. Like I have things that I have to finish, you know, like different series and stuff on configurations that I've started. But I have considered doing videos on natal aspects, you know, like Moon conjunct Mars, Moon conjunct Saturn, blah, blah, blah. However, even though I haven't done, as far as I remember, I don't think I have done any videos on that. So please comment in the comment section, by the way, if you want to see that. But I do remember mentioning the Saturn to Moon conjunction as a potentially problematic configuration in multiple videos. I definitely talked about it in the video where I talked about bad childhoods, and I explained how it links to childhood traumas. And I'm pretty sure I talked about this, maybe even talked about it in the video where I discussed serial killers and really deviant types. Obviously not saying that Meghan Markle is a serial killer or that just anyone who has this conjunction is going to be one. However, as I have pointed out, with Saturn to the Moon, particularly as a conjunction, there seems to be a lot of the times this complex about coming from a poor, underprivileged social background, and how a lot of the times, okay, not all of the times, but a lot of the times I have seen it where this conjunction really produces narcissistic traits, you know, where people become obsessed with social status because they themselves grew up in an environment where they constantly maybe felt like they were less than other people, like they fell short compared to their peers, for instance, that maybe they came from a family that, you know, did not keep up with the Joneses for one reason or another. And as far as I have heard about her family, it does really match her psychological profile. I do remember vaguely, now correct me if I'm wrong, like I said, I kind of remember bits and pieces of what I've seen over the years about her. But I do remember some story that she is estranged from her father and her stepsister, and that there was some kind of a conflict there, like some kind of mutual public dissing of one another, or that Meghan Markle didn't even respond actually to things that her father was saying or stuff like that. So there seems to be this kind of a tense relationship between her and at least part of her family. And I wonder, and again, not just me personally, but based on the theories that I've seen online and bits and pieces of information that I've seen online about her family, it is possible that she is distancing herself because she kind of feels embarrassed about her family background. So that would make sense with this conjunction, you know, like someone who starts in humble beginnings but really wants to join the beau monde, you know, like the high society sort of society, you know, where she can kind of pretend that she was not born from humble beginnings. So closing this parenthesis, because this is, you know, her conjunction and her upbringing. To be fair, with Jupiter there, that also would have brought some positive experiences in her early life environment, especially coming from the mother's side. But the hardships, the potential financial hardships, and maybe feeling like she came from the wrong social background, those complexes are still shown through the conjunction between the Moon and Saturn. So aside from that, so she has this triple conjunction, 3 planets conjunct in Virgo, conjunct his Venus. So a very strong marker of compatibility. I have actually done videos on, I think, pretty much all 3 of these different categories of aspects. I've done Venus to Jupiter, pretty sure. Venus to Saturn, definitely. I've also covered negative, potentially negative outcomes of these aspects, not just conjunctions, in synastry, but also potential positive aspects. And same thing with Moon and Venus. Moon and Venus, definitely remember talking about this. So it's one of the more positive aspects, especially the conjunction, to have in synastry, because it makes a person it makes couples, I'm sorry, very romantically connected, right? So it tends to be this very kind of soft, nurturing, romantic sort of combination where the people want to protect each other and they kind of create this, like, little nook where they feel safe with one another, like in their little nest away from the world. And with Venus, actually, this one is interesting. And again, I'm going to move into the psychology aspect a little bit more because he is the Venus and she is the moon. So the moon is, because of the archetype that the moon is connected to, which is the mother, in this context, tends to be the one who is the more nurturing, understanding, potentially even protective towards the Venus person. So I'm not going to say mommy issues, but I feel like you can draw that conclusion by yourself. Not making fun again, because not making fun, even though I'm laughing, because okay, he has had traumas. I really do have sympathies. I mean, I cannot imagine what his life must have been like, even though, yes, he was born into wealth and all that. Still a lot of trauma, no doubt, and a lot of social pressures coming from the family instead of potentially getting, understanding and affection, which I'm sure a child that age would have needed in order to recover from, losing his mother. At the same time, though, you have Saturn there. So Saturn, pesky little Saturn, right? Again, I'm going to recommend that you watch the video I've done about the negative side of Venus-Saturn combinations in Synastry. And I'm just going to tell you the gist of it, which is that this combination can make the Venus person feel unappreciated at times, right? So in their case, again, actually, now that I think about it in a really messed up way, this actually would fit the description of narcissistic abuse, because if you read up anything about narcissistic relationships, there is this back and forth going on between periods where they shower you with affection, right, and they treat you very nice, and alternatively periods where they're very crappy and they're very critical and downright abusive. So in this multiple conjunction over here between his Venus and her 3 planets, that alone would be enough to explain that kind of dynamic. Not saying that it has happened. I haven't personally seen it happen. I've just seen pictures of him looking pretty depressed at some points. So I'm just saying it would explain it. So I think, again, as I was saying with that Saturn, the Venus person in the Saturn-Venus conjunction can definitely feel unappreciated, even harshly criticized, even unloved sometimes, And I've said this actually, and again, I've seen it mostly where the woman is the Venus, but it's not excluded that it can happen when the man is the Venus, especially in today's world, which has made it has made it easier for women to become narcissists as well. Yay, girl power. I'm being sarcastic. Because, I feel women are copying men in all the wrong ways, but let's not get into that. That's a topic for a different video. But it would explain him potentially even getting abused in this relationship emotionally. I'm not saying physically necessarily. I have mentioned this. I'm pretty sure that Ike Turner and Tina Turner had this, and she was the Venus. But of course, in that context, there were other things going on. I'm pretty sure I have mentioned them in that Venus to Saturn video. Pretty sure. All right. I do remember, of course, in that situation, Ike's horoscope also showed a tendency towards violence. So there were a lot of things that kind of, led to those particular circumstances. As usual, I always mention this, you have to look at the full horoscopes and see what else is going on. But it would definitely explain some criticisms, at least, going on. Or at least him feeling not appreciated, not loved, right? Feeling like maybe she is cold, that she is shutting down emotionally, that he is not being reciprocated enough in his emotions, right? Stuff like that could be happening. So, and I can imagine that if this is the case, I can see how it would be very, very bad and very, very confusing, because you have these this cluster of planets where one of them is very malefic. So Saturn is very, very malefic, and the other two are very benefic. So I'm sure that when she's good, she's very good, you know, and when she's bad, she must be horrible. So I can imagine how how it must be going up and down and up and down, if that is the case. All right, just speculating based on him looking sad in some photos, mainly. And also what I'm seeing here in this aspect, I can definitely see it going that way. All right. Moving on to what we have here is, oh wait, another thing worth mentioning is that this conjunction is happening in his 10th house. Very important, because the 10th house is the house of social status, of career, of how people see you, right? Reputation. And this relationship has very definitely impacted his career, and I would say even his career. I mean, I don't know what he was doing before. I know that he was in the military and all that, and then he moved to, I don't know what the current status is, so I'm sorry if I'm outdated, but last thing that I know about them is that they're living in the US, so I don't know if they're going back or if they're separating or whatever, because, you know, hopefully nothing worse has happened in the meantime since I last got updated on them. But either way, his reputation, I think, was irreparably damaged by this relationship, because I feel a lot of people, you know, viewed him very positively. I remember before this relationship, there were even rumors that that he was going to be the successor instead of William or something like that, or even that the Queen was planning to jump over Charles. Maybe I just heard wrong, but I do remember just people seeing him in a very favorable light. You know, he got a lot of bonus points for the military stuff and all that. People saw him as a good guy, as just, you know, acting like a regular person. And then she came along and everybody was like, oh my God, what is going on? You know, and the fact that, you know, it affected the way the British see him, you know, all kinds of ways. I don't feel like I have to get into it and speculate, right? Because you can probably read about it by yourself. So the bottom line is, it is playing out. It is playing out. And then moving on to his sun Mercury conjunction, which, by the way, again, small parenthesis, have done this. This is the aspect of instant karma, quote unquote, as I have called it. As I have mentioned also in that video, it's not instant exactly, but instant in the sense that this is a kind of conjunction, configuration, that will make you pay off all your debts by the time you leave this world, right? So whereas people who don't have this combination, it's called a Buddha Ditya Yoga. Not that it's important. Basically, Buddha is a Buddha. I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce it. Is Mercury, and Aditya is one word for the sun. Another one would be Surya. So basically, it's just a conjunction, right? It's a yoga that is said to make a person very fair, very rational, just, you know, fair in the sense of just. So I have actually done a separate video about this. I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna try to link it in the video description. Hopefully I won't forget. And just, you know, this would be interesting to see how it plays out in the long run. But in this combination, considering that she is a controversial person and maybe potentially narcissistic, I feel like, unfortunately, if she messes up, he's the one who's going to have to pick up the pieces, right? His reputation might be affected, maybe not so much hers. Let me see. Well, actually, sorry, I take it back. She's also going to be affected because she also has the same yoga. And in fact, in her case, it's also conjunct. So she has the Buddha Aditya Yoga, but then she also has the conjunction to Rahu. So these two planets are conjunct Rahu. So that would explain the overinflated ego. And potentially having had a narcissistic father figure. But okay, I'm closing the parenthesis. The main point, all right, so the Buddha Aditya Yoga basically means that, well, both of them, if they're doing shady things, it's going to continue to affect their reputation. The more they are fake, the more they, especially if they try to do anything illegal or something that harms other people, try to be deceitful or anything, it will be something that comes out. With this yoga, it always comes out. You know, what's done in the dark is going to come to the light, that kind of thing. Just like in the Johnny Cash song. And I'm sure that that stuff is taken from some biblical verse that I don't know. Anyway, Synastry wise, all right, her Venus conjunct his sun. Again, this is positive. This would not just positive, but this actually confirms what a lot of videos have said about them, you know, and a lot of analyses, just whatever. I have to look for what the correct pronunciation is for the plural for analysis. Anyway, I remember one in particular that I really would really match this configuration. It wasn't just one. I think it was at least two that I've seen of people saying stuff like, you know, Harry was this guy that was always kind of in the shadow of William in a way, because William, I don't know if you remember, again, I'm kind of an older millennial, like I said. I was born in 1989, and I do remember when I was in grade school, so when I was like 13 or so, Prince William was like a heartthrob or something, you know. To be fair, he was really cute at that time. And I remember there were all these rumors that, you know, Britney Spears liked him, or that he liked Britney Spears or something. There were all these, like, you know, he was like popular with the chicks, basically. Whereas Harry was, you know, not that he was bad looking. I mean, I don't think he's bad looking even now, but he was always kind of like, you know, second fiddle to his brother. He was always kind of like in the background. And also, because William was the eldest, he was groomed with the idea, he was raised with the idea that he was going to inherit the throne and all that. He was the one that was, I guess, under all of the responsibility and getting most of the attention. Whereas Harry was, again, kind of like the backup, you know. And I've seen a lot of people actually point this out, women that I remember saying this, that Meghan was very clever at exploiting this this lack of feeling seen, which is something ironically that I've heard, not ironically, actually, again, tellingly, I've heard Dr. Ramani talk about as well when she was describing narcissistic abuse. She actually said that a lot of people who end up in abusive relationships with narcissists, they fall for the love bombing, you know, and they fall for the level of overwhelming attention that they can give to their new victim. So especially if you're someone who has this kind of trauma where you felt neglected, or you just felt like nobody really understood you, and you always kind of like, or you felt underappreciated your whole life, and someone suddenly seems like they are all about you, and they only have eyes for you, and they tell you how wonderful you are and how great you are and how nobody appreciates you except for them, it's very easy to fall into that trap, especially if you're not someone who is aware of narcissistic abuse and how narcissists operate. And honestly, this aspect in and of itself would be more than enough to explain this kind of dynamic. Normally, again, between two healthy people, this is a very good, very positive combination. So normally the Venus conjunct Sun means that the Sun feels very loved for who they are, right? It also tends to make the Sun person feel, you know, quite proud about themselves, because again, it's one of those typical male to female energy interactions, right? And think of this as, if you think of the Sun as the king archetype, ironically in this case, it's not far off. And if you think of the Venus as the courtesan archetype, right, and basically the courtesan would flatter the king and tell him how wonderful and beautiful he is and all that stuff. So it would really make sense that, you know, he really fell for the flattery probably and the manipulation. If allegedly, because I don't know what happened in private, I can only speculate, and based on, like I said, what other people have posted online about them. that if she really is narcissistic, that is probably what she did. Constant flattery, showed attention and all that stuff, and he fell for it, really. And then there's a conjunction to Mercury, which technically, again, would make him feel that, oh, she understands me, because, again, Mercury is your way of thinking, it's your ideas. And Venus is, again, it's like all sugar, spice, and everything nice. It's about enticing people. And, again, would probably make sense. Not just that she flattered him, but maybe also, flattered him. That's pretty much the best way to express it. Maybe even pointed out that he was smarter than people gave him credit for. Again, this would really appeal to Mercury in this combination. And it makes sense. Also, notice that this conjunction is in the 9th house. Now, to be fair, his sun and his Mercury are already in the 9th house already. So having 9th house placements does tend to show someone who wants to travel a lot, likes to travel, particularly traveling abroad to foreign lands. And her Venus is in there kind of, stimulating that even further. So to be fair, here I'm actually going to speak against the general gossip, which is that, that she convinced him to move abroad. I'm pretty sure, considering these placements, that he always had a lot of wanderlust. Also with ascendant in Sagittarius, with Jupiter in there, again, would be more than enough to explain wanting to leave your place of birth, basically. And let's see what else. Mars in the 7th house. Well, that makes sense. So her Mars is in Gemini, and it's it's opposite his Jupiter as well, and it's falling in his 7th house. That would definitely explain, again, her the conflict. That would explain conflict, basically, but at the same time, attraction. So Mars tends to be kind of a separating planet. It tends to be a very harsh, cutting planet. No nonsense, no compromise. So whenever it touches the 7th house, it does bring arguments, right? Because the 7th house is the house of partnership, of romance. Not so much romance, actually, more like marriage as the relationship / business part, But Mars in there, again, would show friction, would show lack of diplomacy. So potential arguments a lot. With Gemini, even more tendency to argue because Gemini is very verbal. All right. And let's see what else. We do have his Lilith opposite. Well, both of his Liliths opposite her Moon, Saturn, Jupiter conjunction. So his Lilith's falling in the 4th house, falling onto her, midheaven. But in this case, I would not really see that as particularly relevant, to be honest. However, falling, directly opposite those planets of hers, again, would show the mutual fascination. And in this case, actually, I wonder if her Saturn opposite his Lilith's would actually be more powerful than his Mars conjunct her Lilith's. And that would explain the dynamic in which actually he might feel more controlled than her in this case. And so either way, there is the mutual fascination aspect, and there's probably a mutual control thing going on. It would make a lot of sense. And in her case, the control, because we don't have direct planets, right? So Mars would be more likely to just lose his shit, to be honest, because Mars tends to be aggressive, impulsive. So whenever Mars is put in a spot, or how do you express it? put on the spot, something like that, right? So whenever they're basically challenged in some way, they tend to respond through lack of patience, arguments, fighting, even physicality. Hopefully it doesn't get to that, right? But the moon and Saturn and Jupiter can be very manipulative, especially Saturn. So Saturn and the moon actually are very good at passive aggressive stuff and psychological manipulation. And I would say, again, if that is the case, which I tend to think it is, based again on the materials that I've seen about them online, honestly, I don't think he's a match for her level of manipulation, because, you know, subtleties versus shaking a fist, right? In this world, subtleties tend to win, especially in this particular situation where, you know, she's a woman of color. She can always, you know, well, not always, but a lot of the time she already has pulled, you know, the discrimination card. So I really think he might be in a very tough spot, even worse than Johnny Depp was with Amber Heard, honestly. I really hope I'm wrong. I hope that they are having a good relationship, but who knows? Again, just based on stuff that I've seen, it did not look like he was happy. You also see another thing going into the psychology aspect, which makes sense when you think about it. His moon is opposite his Saturn natally. And is his moon in Krittika? Let me check. Oh my god, it is in Krittika. Oh, and another thing that I saw about them, now I just remembered, holy shit. And it was also on Jesus Enrique Rosas, that's his name, because I remember how he introduces himself. I've watched a few of his videos, and there was this video that he posted about Harry and Meghan being at some public event, and how he touched a woman in a weird way, and she looked like she felt uncomfortable or something. It didn't like fill her up or anything, but he was a little bit too familiar with her, and that Meghan seemed like she was crazy with jealousy. And now that I see his moon in Krittika, wow. Again, I've done a video about Krittika and cheating. I will be linking that in the video description. Number one, what cracks me up is I can't believe I haven't checked his horoscope up until now, because he matches the Krittika energy very well. The military thing, the red hair, and I know there are loads of red-haired people, doesn't mean that they're all in Krittika, but I think I have mentioned this in the general description of Krittikas, is that many of them, if they have the genes for it, they will tend to have red hair, and even when they don't have the genes for it, they tend to look good with red hair. I've given some examples of famous people who, you know, because Krittika is connected to fire, right, it's ruled by the sun, so yeah, it tends to, like a lot of people with red hair. You know, another natural redhead who has a moon in Krittika is Jessica Chastain. You know, just to give you an example. But closing the parenthesis, right? The cheating aspect. And again, here's the thing. When I saw those pictures, my impression, again, as an amateur, but also someone with a very sharp intuition polished by many years of reading horoscopes, is that he probably feels trapped, and there's probably a lot of passive-aggressive control stuff going on between him and Meghan. And I feel like that was a desperate attempt of him to be defiant of Meghan, right? To kind of show, I can be flirty with other women or something, but I think it backfired in an inappropriate way, because I remember even in his, I don't think it was only Jesus Enrique Rosas who did a video. I think it were multiple people were being scandalized about the fact that he was being quote-unquote inappropriate. And to be fair, having seen the photos from that event, that woman in question did look uncomfortable. So yeah, but I really think the woman in question was honestly just a prop. The sad reality is that, you know, it looked like Harry was just trying to get back at Meghan for something, you know, and piss her off. Or maybe he was actually flirting, it could have been both things at the same time. Maybe he actually found that woman attractive and he was awkwardly flirting at the same time, but he also saw it as an opportunity to piss Meghan off. Yeah, so just based on the things that I have seen, and I can't believe that I just randomly remembered that, because I haven't, like I said, I have not really seen or heard anything about them in months. Like, not like I follow their lives or anything, unless something pops up on my YouTube feed, some gossip or something. But already, just based on the stuff that I've seen on their horoscopes and based on their horoscopes and the stuff that I remember seeing about them, my impression is that things might escalate with him becoming more overtly aggressive. Again, because of that Mars-Lilith combination. Like I've said, Mars tends to become aggressive, and Krittika especially, they tend to kind of lose their temper sometimes. And also Kritikas are kind of known, especially in matters of the heart, to kind of be impulsive, walk over dead bodies to get what they want and not think about consequences. I've mentioned this in several videos, and I will keep mentioning it, that in my opinion, I think Scarlett O'Hara, the character, was a very Krittika archetype, very much an embodiment of a kind of Krittika archetype, a very underdeveloped one. But to be fair, I have seen a lot of people with prominent Kritikas behaving in that Scarlett O'Hara sort of way, where they... Oops. Sorry about that. Where was I? Yes, I saw a lot of, Krittika dominant people behaving in that sort of way, where they're immature and, they hurt other people's feelings, and, even things like cheating, walking over dead bodies to get what they want. Usually it shows most prominently in, affairs of the heart, like pursuing their passions, their interests and whatnot. But it also can reflect in other areas of life, right? I'm going to link that video in the video description, in this video's description. So if you're curious to find out more about the Krittika thing, I've done a 2-part video where I talked about the connections between Krittika and infidelity, and I looked at a few famous couple examples. So yeah, okay, closing the parenthesis, moving on to what else I'm seeing here. I was gonna say, I started with the moon Saturn, and then I got sidetracked by the fact that his moon is in Krittika, and I was like, oh my god, I cannot believe that I missed that. Well, I did look at his horoscope before, but I haven't gone in depth. But one thing I wanted to say is it makes sense, because moon opposite Saturn, first of all, shows a pretty cold, stern, emotional environment, I have also actually mentioned in that Krittika video that when Saturn is aspecting the moon, or the planet in Krittika, based on whichever that planet is, there are higher chances of this person behaving in a more, let's say, for lack of a better word, civilized manner, and holding their shit together, and behaving the way that society expects from them. But again, in this context, I think it's only a matter of time before he might blow up. Either he's gonna blow up, or he's gonna blow in and become depressed and I don't know, institutionalized. Hopefully not, heaven forbid. But again, it could go in a wide variety of ways, and but the barren emotional nature and environment described by this conjunction would be explained in his comfort in this relationship, having the Venus, so having his Venus conjunct her Saturn, right? Because he's probably used to that. He's used to lack of affection. He's used to people who are maybe cold and professional, and not only that, but it shows the mother figure was perceived to be like that. I don't know if it was Diana, to be honest. I feel like this could have been someone else who replaced Diana, because he was very young when she passed away. I think he must have been 8 years old. something like, I don't know, was he 10? No, he must have been, I think 12, somewhere along those lines. But he was very young either way. So he was still very young. I would say probably Queen Mother or whoever took over the mothering roles, or maybe nannies, right? They embodied this mother archetype and explained this moon Saturn combination in his horoscope, meaning that he viewed his mother figure, or mother figures. I'm going to open another parenthesis here. Krittika is connected to having multiple mother figures because of the legend from Vedic astrology connected to Kartikeya, the hero of Krittika. Anyway, closing parenthesis. But however many mother figures he had, he perceived them to be stern, professional, status conscious, that's another one, controlled, not very affectionate, all right? Very just professional, like pretty cold emotionally. And that would explain why he felt comfortable, at least initially, because again, unless you become healed and unless you become self-aware, this is true from whichever perspective you want to look at it from, right? Whether you want to look at it from the astrological or the psychological perspective. But if people don't become self-aware and understand the patterns that govern them, they are drawn to whoever looks like they might meet their unmet childhood needs, So in this case, him having had this trauma potentially around the mother figure, he probably was kind of looking for someone who would be nurturing and loving and caring and all that, and someone who just looked familiar. Instead, he basically fell for the general. That's what I'm trying to say. He fell for the general trend that most people fall for, especially when they're young and or unhealed and not self-aware, which is they go for people that just feel familiar, right? So he may not have even been able to put his finger on why she felt familiar. There was just a familiar vibe about her, right? Now, I'm not trying to say that Princess Diana was a narcissist. Like I said, in his case, because most likely he had multiple mother figures, this could have been one or multiple of his mother figures that were perceived this way. Meaning pretty cold and calculated, that's the bottom line. Alright, so I had to take a break because life keeps getting in my way when it comes to me doing astrology for some reason. But yes, back to Prince Harry. So yeah, I do remember I talked about his mother situation. So these are pretty much actually the main things that I can see. One other thing that I notice when it comes to her planetary placements affecting and how they affect him is a lot of her planets are falling into his 8th house. Basically, this shows that her actions, well, everything about her really has a very powerful impact on him psychologically and emotionally. Normally with 8th house overlays, there is also a strong, again, sexual attraction. But in this particular case, I would not automatically go there necessarily because the planets that are falling in his 8th house are not particularly connected to sexuality or, passion. I'm talking about her sun, Mercury, and Rahu falling into his 8th house. Again, I would also link this to some extent with, first of all, a very transformative impact because, again, the 8th house is about change, it's about transformation. And, she certainly has transformed him and his life trajectory. So I guess that's how it matches. One other thing that I can say that kind of stands out to me is, of course, his Darakaraka situation. So his Darakaraka is Jupiter, which falls in 9 degrees 55 minutes Sagittarius, which falls in Mula Nakshatra. Mula Nakshatra actually is connected to people who are very, very driven, very ambitious, very intense. Also has a strong connection to sexuality, because Mula has a strong connection to the root chakra or the sacral chakra, which is where, the sexual energy is stored. Also, all energies that have to deal with survival are connected to the root chakra. I have to say, a lot of really famous people have, not just famous, but people who become very well known, very successful in their fields tend to have strong Mula placements, just as an observation. But in his case, having Jupiter as Darakaraka, it shows that he wants a spouse that expands his horizon. In the sense that, well, pretty much as I have said, really, there's no more literal way of saying it, I think. So with Jupiter, and again, I'm going to mention this, and I'm going to try to link the related videos in the description, that I have done videos for each planet as Darakaraka and how they play out, especially how they play out in terms of what the person psychologically needs from a partner in a relationship in order to feel fulfilled. And with Jupiter, a huge portion of what they need from a partner is, like I said, someone who challenges them, who takes them out of their comfort zone in many ways, who expands their horizons, and someone who is educated, someone who is, how should I put it? Expansive, someone who doesn't settle in life, someone who constantly wants more, someone who is optimistic in many ways, also someone who is generous and wise. So I feel like with her, being involved in charities, again, I think at least initially she seemed like the ideal partner. And again, it plays into his traumas about his mother, I have to say. I mean, Princess Diana was also heavily involved in charities throughout her life. And let me see. Oh, if I look at the... Oh, okay, I'm going to talk about that later a little bit. But looking at her Darakaraka is the moon. So what she needs most of all from a partner is understanding. And again, at least initially, I think she probably felt like she met the right man. Maybe from her side of the story, she definitely met the right man, because with Moon as Darakaraka, she needs someone to have an emotional connection with, someone who is going to be supportive, actually, in many ways. So someone who almost will play the, I guess, traditionally feminine role in the relationship. Normally, you don't see this with Moon as Darakaraka, but I would say you don't see this because most couples are still very much influenced by traditional gender roles in the world today. But in couples such as theirs, which is very progressive, and very much in line with the times, it makes sense that the roles almost become flipped sometimes. And this could also lead to dissatisfaction in the relationship. I have talked about, I am going to try to find, again, I have a lot of related videos to this, but I'm going to try to find this video. I have talked about this topic a little bit in the video where I talked about what astrology taught me about gender. I'm pretty sure that that's the video where I talked about this. The main idea is that the way I see it is men and women both have a biological side and they have a spiritual side. And the spiritual side does not care about the biological side or the biological needs or social expectations or any of that. This is why if you see, a man and a woman, both of whom have Sun in Aries, they're both going to have very similar characteristics, provided that, let's say both of them have Sun in Krittika in Aries. They're both going to be driven, ambitious, goal-oriented, self-motivated, want to be leaders, probably like challenging situations, etc., etc. But the difference is that while a man will have generally no problem being accepted for who he is, a woman, on the other hand, in most places in the world, even today, will probably have problems being appreciated and accepted for who she is, and will have to endure a lifetime of frustrations because of this, to try to pretend that she is, something that she's not, or try to tone down her ambition, try to make herself smaller and look less threatening, etc., etc. And I mentioned in that video that there is a difference between what the physical body needs and what the emotional body, like the spiritual body, needs, right? So your spirit needs someone who matches your energy, but your body needs what your body needs. So like all women, for instance, irrespective of how masculine their horoscope is, still need protection and security from a man, because that is what the biological side of them needs. So the whole point of that video, in a very kind of short explanation right now, is that it's harder for people to feel fulfilled in relationships when their polarities are basically backwards from what society expects them. So like a woman, for instance, who has a lot of masculine energy in her horoscope, and she requires feminine qualities from a man, will have a much harder time finding fulfilling relationships than a man with those qualities. Not just because it's harder for her to find a man like that, but also because of massive social pressures, which make it so that even if a man would naturally feel comfortable being in a supportive role, because of social pressures, he will start to feel inferior or insecure, or start to feel maybe disrespected by other men because he's playing more of a supportive role, etc., etc. So my intuition, again, coupled with what I've seen in their horoscope, is that it could get to that. It could get to the point where I wonder if he himself actually feels really comfortable, to a large extent, being her supporter, But then because of the negative views of their relationship, and maybe, I'm sure, negative relations that have ensued with his family and with other people, that could be one aspect of it, irrespective of whether she is a narcissist and maybe is, even potentially abusive towards him. Maybe that could be happening, but again, I haven't actually seen serious evidence of that, just the fact that he looks sad. But it could just be, like I said, because of social pressures, or him feeling like he is somehow less of a man in this connection, that it will breed frustrations over time, and in turn might cause him to act out, as I have also mentioned previously, But yeah, I think from her perspective, at least in the beginning, maybe she really was getting what she needed out of this relationship. I don't know about whether she's getting it right now. I don't know what her situation is. But what I can tell you is that with the moon, she requires a man who is very understanding, who almost plays kind of that mothering, nurturing role. Even though in her case, the moon is a little bit damaged there because it's conjunct Saturn. Even though it's conjunct Saturn and Jupiter, right? So actually, they have compatible energies around their Dharakaras, because both of them have Jupiter there in the mix, right? So she has her Dharaka is moon conjunct Jupiter and conjunct Saturn. His Dharaka is Jupiter, right? And now, if you look at it from the perspective of, I'm going to reference another video that I talked about with a little bit of a research that I did, where I talked about how I noticed this pattern that long-lasting couples tend to have compatible energies between one another's Atmakarkas and Darkarkas. So like if you look at the Darkarka energy, or the energy surrounding the Darkarka and the energy surrounding the other partner's Atmakarka, you tend to see similar energies. And I mentioned there that that is a strong sign of compatibility as far as I have noticed. I've also done some analyses for some famous couples, so I'm going to try to find that video and link it in the description as well. And I just wanted to look at their horoscopes from that perspective a little bit. So his Jupiter, again, his Darkarka being in Jupiter in Mula Nakshatra, which is ruled by Ketu. And her Atmakarka is Venus. That makes sense. Will not dwell on it, but her Atmakarka is Venus. It's in 19 degrees Leo. I'm pretty sure that this is Purva Falguni, but let me double check. Yeah, it's Purva Falguni. So this is a very, sensuous, loving, wealth-loving sort of energy, okay? And this is her Atmakarka, which means that her main goal in life is to experience the finer things and to experience wealth and well-being and also arts to some extent, right? Because of that very Venusian energy. And Purva Falguni is ruled by Venus, so Venus is falling in a Venus-ruled nakshatra that's very strong. There's also some sun energy because it's falling in Leo. And aside from that, let's see. There are no other major energies on her Venus. So it's not looking good. I'm just telling you right now. Let me see, where's the Rahu? Yeah, the Rahu is like one sign previous, right? So there's no Ketu energy on her Venus. So my point is here that if I remember correctly from that video, and I think I do, they have a similar combination to what Vivian Lee and Laurence Olivier had in terms of how little support and how little common ground there is between his Darkarka and her Atmakarka. I will recommend that you watch that video because I can't reproduce everything I've said there. It's a very lengthy video, but I would say it's worth watching and you will get a very strong sense of what I'm talking about, because I actually even drew some like some small calculations and some sketches there that make it very obvious and easy to watch and understand towards the end of that video. So if you're curious to see it, and I've looked over a few famous couples to illustrate exactly what I was talking about. On the other hand, so basically with his Darkarka and her Atmakarka not having common energies, basically shows that ultimately what he needs from a relationship does not really jive or is kind of like at odds with what her life trajectory is. That's what her Atmakarka is. Now, if you look at it from the other point of view, so her Darkarka from the other perspective, right? Her Darkarka is in Virgo. It's 11 degrees, 18 minutes Virgo. Let me see. Pretty sure that it's Hasta, but let me check. Yes, it's Hasta Nakshatra, which is ruled by the moon. So interesting. I mean, wow, she has her moon in the moon ruled nakshatra, and she has Venus in the Venus ruled nakshatra. That's impressive. Also tends to show that her moon and Venus are pretty strong with these placements. So her moon is in 11 degrees in Hasta. It's conjunct Saturn and Jupiter. Now his Atmakarka is the sun. It's falling in Leo, and this is Uttara Falguni, which is ruled by the sun. Oh, brother. Let me see, actually. And his sun, there are some conjunctions. His sun, let's see. Yeah, his sun is conjunct Mercury. And Yeah, there is an aspect, hold on, there is an aspect from Jupiter. There's a ninth aspect from Jupiter. So around his Atmakaraka, we have Sun very strongly represented, right? So in Uttara Falguni, which is ruled by the Sun, it's conjunct Mercury, which I'm pretty sure is in Purva Falguni. So, okay, there's a little bit of Venus there. Let me see, 1134. No, it's actually in Magha Nakshatra. That makes even more sense. I mean, for royalty. So, his Mercury is in Magha, and his Sun is in Uttara Falguni, which, by the way, is a very stubborn nakshatra, which makes a lot of sense. Which I feel, on the one hand, probably at the beginning of the relationship worked to Meghan Markle's favor, but probably now as he is getting more dissatisfied, it's probably going to end up becoming a problem for her. Yeah, definitely Uttara Falguni. So we have Sun, we have Ketu. There's a little bit of Ketu because Magha is ruled by Ketu. We have Mercury and a little bit of Jupiter, right? So these are the energies falling around his Atmakarka. Now, if you look at her Dharakarka, which is the moon, we do have Mercury because it's in Virgo, so there is that common ground there. We do have the Jupiter, because her moon is conjunct Jupiter. His Atmakarka is trine by Jupiter. So there is Jupiter. There are two common energies there. There's no Sun, though. Still, there is a common ground. There's a decent amount of common ground there. So I think from her perspective, right, her needs in the relationship technically would match to some degree, at least. I would say to a bare minimum extent, they have some kind of support there. So her needs from the relationship are in compatibility or are in harmony with his life trajectory to some extent, I would say. But I still think that to a large extent they don't really match, because with his energy being in Leo, so his Atmakarka being in Leo, let me see, it's falling in the 9th house. His trajectory is to be kind of a leader, which automatically makes it difficult if you have a spouse that is not exactly super focused on letting you lead, you know what I mean? I can imagine how this can be very frustrating for someone who has Sun as Atmakarka. So I'm very curious to know how this relationship is going to progress, but I'm not psychic. My guess is that eventually it might reach some kind of a breaking point, or he might cheat, or I don't know, something might be going on. First of all, let's not forget that the royal family is notoriously accepting of cheating, especially when it comes to the male members of the family. One other big thing that I noticed, speaking of, assessing the risk for, I was thinking even risk of violence here, maybe if it gets bad enough. Is there a risk of violence? I mean, I guess only time will tell. I guess there's always a risk of violence, but probably won't escalate to that level. However, if you look at their Mars and Saturn situation, so his Saturn is trine her Mars. His Saturn is a Libra, and it's trine her Mars in Gemini. So that's good. It shows that basically he's not threatened by her ambitions. On the other hand, his Mars, it's a Scorpio. Oh, it's not in a bad position to her Saturn either. So her Saturn is in Virgo, and his Mars is in Scorpio. So I wouldn't see any potential intense hatred, not based on the chart comparisons, but let's move on to the significant part, so to speak. The more significant, I mean, it's equally significant, but in different ways, the composite chart. Before that, just a quick look on the other side of the spectrum, which would be his placements on her chart, right? So if you look at the screen now, you will see her chart is in the blue and his placements are in the red, to see how his horoscope influences her life, right? Mars in the 5th house, that's very strongly passionate. And again, we've seen the same conjunction, right, of Lilith's, both of them, being conjunct his Mars. So that would definitely explain a huge amount of attraction between the two of them. And his Mercury and Sun is falling into her 2nd house, which I'm sure would increase her self-esteem and also increase her sense of stability and maybe even directly her wealth, which would make sense. Aside from that, his moon is in her 10th house. This is not a great placement because, well, again, it actually tends to go hand in hand with what I mentioned previously about that incident with him touching a woman in a weird way in public. With the moon in the 10th house, right, in a couple, right, so whether it's in Synastry overlays, even more so if it's in the composite chart, it tends to show that everybody sees their business, you know what I mean? Like, it sees the privacy of their emotions. And in this case in particular, it looks like his emotions, right, are influencing the way that people view her. Which, of course, makes sense, right? With all the pictures of him looking sad and people saying that she's a narcissist. Then we have Jupiter in the 6th house. I would say that this just means she has moved on to a more leisurely, everyday life since they have gotten together. That would make sense, right? Because Jupiter is the great benefic and it brings ease and it brings opportunities and, you know, everything being light and fluffy to some extent. And falling in the 6th house, it would explain basically, again, an increase of lifestyle. Aside from that, with Jupiter in the 6th house, this could also show that because of him, on a day-to-day basis, she is, in a way, pulled into Jupiterian activities. So things that are more elevated, things that are, I guess, generous as well. I'm thinking things like charity would make sense. Yeah, pretty much. Then, she has that Moon, Saturn, and Jupiter cluster in the 3rd house. That makes a lot of sense. So I will say one thing, she is extremely ambitious with this placement. Especially since Jupiter also rules her 6th house in her horoscope. So extremely ambitious and probably can handle huge amounts of pressure. And then his Venus falling into her 3rd house, I think it just softens her up, honestly. This is how I would see it. So Venus is a very kind of gentle, soft sort of energy. So I think it tones down her ambition a little bit, tones down maybe her harshness as well. Not just in the way that she acts, but also the way she thinks. So, like, somehow being around him just makes her feel more relaxed, more, let's take a break, let's have a little bit of fun, that kind of thing. And I feel like without his Venus, she's normally way more intense. Alright, this is pretty much what else I could say about the perspective of how his planets are touching her horoscope. Let me see. Well, one more thing that I can see is his Saturn is falling into her 4th house. On the one hand, this is a heavy placement. It can be very binding. I mean, again, this is triggering some kind of a childhood situation thing. I don't want to say childhood traumas, but could be childhood, anything connected to childhood is potentially triggered through this relationship because Saturn is falling in her 4th house. So the 4th house is early childhood, their relationship to the mother side of the family. And there's also a sense of emotional heaviness and potentially a sense of emotional responsibility towards him. It could be towards him or it could be like mutual, from both of their sides. So some kind of a sense of emotional bonding, but it's really heavy, And if you remember in in his case, it's, most of the heaviest cluster of her planets was falling in his 8th house, which is a water house, which means that he is very emotionally impacted by her. Versus the other way around, it doesn't seem to be equally represented. Saturn in the 4th house, yes, it is emotionally heavy, especially with her moon being dark Karaka. Emotional connections is extremely important for her in a relationship, having emotional intimacy and safety and all of that. But overall, I don't see her water houses being equally impacted, Well, okay, there's also, I was going to say there's also Mars, but that's her Mars, yeah. So her Mars is in the 12th house. No, I don't see the equal impact here. So he only has one planet in her 4th house. That's the only water impact. And he, from his side, she had two planets, Sun and Mercury and Rahu in his 8th house. And I guess if you want to count this as minor impact, there's also her Liliths falling into his 12th house, her midheaven falling into his 4th house. Could have some minor influences as well. But I still see more of an emotional impact from her side to his horoscope rather than the other way around. So he is the one who's more emotionally impacted, if I am to just look at these things strictly. Okay, so moving on to the composite chart, which I'm very curious to see. Oh, wow. Okay, this makes sense, I have to say. Well, first thing that stands out to me, Mars conjunct Venus. Not only that, okay, I take it back. So she is equally impacted, and the reason I say that, maybe even more impacted in some ways emotionally, because Mars conjunct Venus is falling in Virgo, okay? First of all, this conjunction in and of itself, especially falling in the 7th house, is an extremely passionate connection, When it comes to falling in the 7th house, this would make sense with respect to why people cannot have a neutral opinion of them, because the 7th house in the composite shows how you deal with others as a couple, right? So Venus and Mars in there in the 7th house would make them very intense. They come across very strongly towards other people. People cannot really see them as just soft, diplomatic, neutral figures, no matter how hard they try, right? They come across as really intense. They come across as passionate in many ways. So people will have a strong reaction to them, no matter what they do together as a couple. In addition to that, there is the benefit here of them being able to work together as a couple. This makes sense, because I think they are doing stuff like charity and also feeling up women inappropriately in public. I'm sorry, that's not funny, but kind of is. They are doing stuff together, but the bottom line is they work well together as a couple. They feel motivated to work well together as a couple. And the reason I say that she is potentially even more attached is because her moon, Jupiter, Saturn, multiple conjunction falls in Virgo. So her moon is conjunct the composite Mars-Venus conjunction. So that shows that this relationship has a very strong impact on her. So she's very emotionally attached to it. She's very emotionally attached to the outcome of this relationship as well. And very stimulated, probably feels very passionate because, I mean, this is, again, kind of would match the description of a narcissist because it almost, I mean, if you stretch it a little bit, you can almost say that she's more turned on by the idea of the two of them rather than him so much, you know. The composite sun is also falling in Leo, so he would be pretty invested in this as well, although it's not so much an emotional investment. It basically shows that the, you know, ultimate destination of this relationship matches his ultimate destination in some ways, or like the trajectory of this relationship is somehow supporting his life's path, especially considering the fact that his sun is his Atmakaraka as well, which is the soul's ultimate purpose in this lifetime. There's another big wow. I think I've seen this before in another famous couple, but I don't remember who. So the composite North Node, or the Rahu, is in Gemini, and it's conjunct her natal Mars. Does not conjoin any planets. For him, actually, it's the South Node is conjunct Jupiter. Oh wow! So. Well, the South Node of the relationship being conjunct Jupiter shows that initially the relationship felt really comfortable in many ways. But it could be that as it progresses, it pushes too much outside of his comfort zone. Like pushes him too much outside of his comfort zone. And then with the Rahu, so the composite Rahu conjunct her Mars, it shows on the one hand that, again, it's a strong attraction point. Again, she's like very attracted to the relationship in some ways, in the sense that, you know, Rahu shows materialism, right? So this relationship actually increases her ambition, her drive, also her materialism to a large extent. But then there's also that tendency maybe to be irritated because Rahu conjunct Mars in you know, two charts interaspects, in like chart interaspects, might naturally increase the tendency towards argumentativeness between two partners and irritability. I had a separate video where I talked about Mars Rahu in relationships and how not just Mars Rahu and or Ketu, both of them could be potentially dangerous because they bring out anger issues. And with Mars Rahu, it is particularly emphasized because Rahu increases things as time progresses. So like the longer the two of them are together, the more likely it is for her anger to be stimulated, right? So again, this could breed argumentativeness on her part and, you know, fights and God knows what, especially since her Mars is falling in his 7th house. I can only imagine that this would bring, you know, a lot of fights between the two of them. The composite Jupiter and Saturn are also conjunct his Saturn. So this is a very important glue because any Saturn conjunction, any kind of an aspect between Saturn and another planet in Synastry is an important glue that makes people feel responsible for one another, makes people want to commit, especially the Saturn person. So in this case, his Saturn being conjunct the composite Jupiter and Saturn shows that he is very, very glued, very committed to the relationship. And it's interesting that they have such powerful synastry. So each of them individually has such powerful synastry with the relationship itself. So like both of them are so invested in the relationship itself as a separate entity. And again, she's the one whose moon is being impacted very strongly by the composite chart. From his side, let me see. Yeah, so his moon is in Aries. There's no strong aspect to his moon. There's a trine going on, a mild trine going on from the composite sun in Leo, but that's pretty much the strongest aspect. So again, not as much emotional investment, which is not to say, by the way, that, again, from his perspective, what I see is that his attachment to the relationship itself is more maybe pragmatic or more idealistic, right? Not so much emotional, but her investment in the relationship itself is very emotional. Now, either way, even if you ignore the composite, right? Because ultimately the inter aspects are equally, if not more important. So if you ignore the composite, they still have really strong synastry aspects. One thing that I didn't check though is just how, I'm not seeing very strong Saturn placements actually. So there are some mild aspects. So from his Saturn in Libra, there is a trine to her Mars in Gemini. There's a sextile to her Venus. There's a square to her Mercury. There's a square to her Sun. So there are some squares going on, which technically in Vedic astrology are not even taken as seriously as aspects, but I look at them simply because I have a background in tropical astrology and I've noticed that they can be very, very relevant and very impactful. So I would still count the squares for something, but there are no strong conjunctions. Now, from her perspective, from her side, her Saturn is in Virgo. Oh, there is a conjunction to his Venus, yeah. So there is that strong conjunction of commitment. And again, ironically, she's the one who's more committed to him, but then she could also be more committed to tearing him down at the same time. Because like I said, see, here's the problem with Saturn in conjunction to Venus in synastry. It can be like one of those situations of the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Like even if the Saturn person thinks that they're doing the right thing and they're behaving properly in the relationship, they could still be hurting the Venus person, right? They could be hurting their self-esteem, their confidence, their sense of attractiveness. That's a big one. Even though you might think, well, he's a man, so he doesn't need to feel like a pretty little princess. You would be surprised, because, again, Venus still, for both genders, shows sense of self-esteem and also the capacity to be attractive to a large extent. Also, wealth, that's another one. So maybe with her Saturn conjunct his Venus, she is draining his wealth. She feels like a restriction on his wealth. That would make sense. Actually, that might make sense the more you think about, the more I think about some stuff that I read about them. Wasn't there some kind of wasn't there some piece of news that said, wasn't there some news? Anyway, you don't say piece of news. Wasn't there some news that basically said he was cut off from his funds or something? Like the royal family cut him off because he moved outside of the UK or something like that. Like he wasn't going to get his allowance or something. That would make sense in this context with these planets. Another thing that you notice with the composite chart is there is a Moon Mercury conjunction. That's really good because they can talk about their feelings. So, on the one hand, they can talk about their feelings, and on the other hand, they can have very strong emotional understanding of each other, like even without talking, they could be almost downright telepathic. So it does show a very strong intimacy, I would say. So I would imagine that this appealed to her, especially having Moon as Darakaraka, having this level of emotional closeness with someone that, especially having Mercury conjunct Moon, this would make her feel that, she is understood, that she can talk about anything. So that would make a lot of sense. Overall, when it comes to the composite, so there are two very strong actually 3 strong conjunctions, right? But overall, the chart is still not exactly super together, like it doesn't have like a very strong single focus. You still get the sense that there are multiple kind of scattered energies here pulling in different directions, which again I would take as potential inner conflicts of how do they're gonna have to do more. They're gonna have to work harder on balancing different sides of themselves out, like balancing different sides of their relationship needs and their individual needs, so that they feel like the relationship is first of all, so that they feel that both of them are meeting their needs in the relationship, that both of them feel like they're achieving their destinies in life, right? So yeah, there are potential conflicts is all I'm going to say, but there are some pretty strong compatibility factors as well. It just cracked me up. I mean, I did want to say this, but at the same time, like, I didn't want to say it because I didn't want to add... I don't know why I didn't want to say it. I mean, I guess it's kind of disappointing when you're an astrologer and you see so many horoscopes and, like, people always turn out to fall into the same patterns over and over again. But whatever. Let me not get philosophical. I just wanted to say, now that I have these images in my head of the photo snapped of Harry looking sad, it actually reminds me of the photo snapped of Ben Affleck looking the same, and that stuff about... I mean, I think they have separated, haven't they? They separated for like the second time now, Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez. I also did their Synastry a while ago. I don't remember. But the reason I remembered that, and the reason I'm drawing this parallel, is because Ben Affleck and J-Lo also have strong Lilith aspects in Synastry, just like Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. And I did mention Ben Affleck and J-Lo in that video where I talked about Lilith and Synastry. And I mentioned how it brings people together that normally would have no business being together because they have nothing in common, or they're from totally different worlds. And I feel this relationship might have some similar patterns, not entirely the same, but the same thing with the Lilith going on, like very strong irrational attraction. And there is good Synastry as well, like I said, but I also see a lot of challenges. So I guess time will tell. I don't know. Aside from this, okay, one final mention would be the Ashtakut score. I have mentioned this before in other Synastry readings. It's a Vedic, very typically Vedic compatibility score. It's not something that I take as, the law or something, like if people don't have this, that it means that they're doomed, but it does provide valuable insights. So things that I noticed, again, is very positive. Something you see very positive is the comfort area, the prosperity area, also the health area, right? that actually corresponds to yoni and this system. It doesn't call you, it doesn't say it's the yoni compatibility, but that's the, oh no, sorry, the yoni is underneath, my bad. The yoni compatibility, right, it's a 3 out of 4. That's very good. So again, this is the physical compatibility. I have mentioned this in other videos, that each nakshatra has its own animal yoni, and these yonis are used for sexual compatibility between two people. So having a 3 out of 4 is pretty much close to perfect, right? The best score of course is 4 out of 4, but those are rare. So 3 out of 4, very good. That's above average. Aside from that, which actually matches, having Mars conjunct Venus in composite, and then having all that Lilith energy, that makes sense. A lot of it makes sense. But anyway, aside from that, there is this prosperity compatibility, which is a 3 out of 3, which again shows that together they are able to create wealth. They are able to have a good life together, right? Which I can only imagine would especially suit Meghan Markle's interests and, goal in life, because she is the one with Venus as Atmakarka. And Venus is all about the finer things in life. It's all about enjoying things through the 5 senses, materialism, wealth, comfort, etc., hedonism, and all that. And another thing is, okay, the work aspect is there, which is really good. I mean, I've done synastry analysis for a lot of people, and I think you probably remember that I have mentioned this with other famous couples where they don't have it. I very distinctly remember mentioning this at some point, that Marilyn Monroe, I think with both of her husbands, actually, with Miller especially, because with Miller, they tried to work together and it became very bad. It turned out very badly for both of them, and she did not have this. They did not have this, basically. They had the 0 score. And I've seen it with a lot of famous couples that, sometimes in most cases when they have a 0 score, they don't even try to work together, because naturally there's just no affinity for each other's work, right? Maybe they work in totally different fields, etc., right? But in this case, they have that mutual work thing, which again makes sense with their charity stuff. The attraction, affection is 1 out of 2, not catastrophic, I guess, not great, not terrible. But let's see, the friendship part is pretty bad, as you can see, right? So this one is calculated based on the compatibility between the planets. Sorry, the planets that are ruling the moon sign. I had to sneeze. So, meaning he has moon in Aries, so it's ruled, his moon is ruled by Mars, and her moon is in Virgo, it's ruled by Mercury, right? So, not the most harmonious combination of energies. And then the most catastrophic, potentially, according to traditional Vedic teachings as well, is the temperament, the Gana. So he's a Rakshasa and she's a Deva. So he's a Krittika and she is a Hasta. That gets a 1 out of 6, okay? Now, I have mentioned this before in other videos that in today's world, there might be more, you see these couples all the time where they don't have this compatibility particularly strong, right? So one of them is a Rakshasa, the other one is a Deva. By the way, Rakshasa is a demon nakshatra, so they are seen as the harshest nakshatras. The Manushyas are human nakshatras, the Devas are godly nakshatras, right? And again, you may think that I'm biased cause, I keep mentioning negative things about the Devas, but it's just based on what I've seen. Deva nakshatras are actually the worst people with peace and love, because the difference between Rakshasas and Devas, really, and Rakshasas and Manushyas, because Manushyas are somewhere in the middle, right? But I would say devas are actually the most arrogant people, generally, right? They're actually the kind of people that tend to be snobbish, that tend to want to appear as better than what they really are. Whereas Rakshasas tend to get a bad reputation simply because they're blunt, you know? So it's not that they're necessarily worse than others. It's just that they're very honest about what they really think, or they're much less focused on diplomacy, and they're to a large extent just not interested in lying or pretending, right? And so because of that, people label them as rough or whatever, because they just don't bother with niceties, you know. But devas can be extremely fake, you know. They can be extremely fake, and they can be extremely arrogant, and to the point where they lose touch with reality. And you see this with all of them, honestly. I've seen it with every one of them, where they have this tendency towards arrogance. Some of them more than others. Okay? But again, this is a parenthesis, and crap, maybe, I don't know, maybe I'll talk about this in a separate video, a short one, more in depth. But the bottom line is that the nakshatras, I mean, according to traditional teachings, it's seen as Rakshasas and Devas not working because Rakshasas are too rough and tough, basically. So whereas Devas are seen as softer in energy, which I really don't agree with, honestly, but whatever. This is the traditional teaching. Either way, there's definitely an incompatibility, because even if the Devas fake softness, it's an incompatibility with the fact that the Rakshasas just don't bother to fake anything. So yes, there is a temperament problem there. On the other hand, then, we have the constructive ability, constructivism, society, and couple. This one is fascinating. So, like, because together, okay, so they have a good work score. They have a 1 out of 1. But then they have a bad society and couple, which actually reflects, I mean, are they actually helping people? Yes, I mean, they are involved in charities, right? No matter how you look at it. Okay, sure, you may say that they're only doing it for publicity, but they do work together, ultimately, and they work together efficiently, but society still views them negatively. So this is what this Bakut compatibility aspect shows. And last but not least, there is the progeny compatibility, which is an 8 out of 8, which is really good, basically. I know that there are all those rumors about them, and again, I have no idea what to say about that. I don't find it impossible that, you know, she actually gave birth, because a lot of people were saying things like, I mean, could they have faked a pregnancy? Sure. But even if she faked a pregnancy, that there's still a high chance that it's still her biological kids, you know? So with the basically what the progeny aspect shows is fertility together as a couple, number 1. And number 2, and equally important, it shows the health of the children. So I have mentioned this in other videos that I've seen cases where people don't have this. They have a 0 out of 8, and they have had, you know, kids with very serious health problems. One couple that I know even had a child that passed away at the age of 3. So, and then of course the most common thing you see is people who simply cannot conceive together. Or have a very hard time. You know, it takes them a long time, a lot of treatments and all that. But yeah, they have this positive, so I would argue, at least from my perspective, that I think those are her biological kids. Even if they have used some help from modern science, I still think that it is very possible that they have had biological kids together, considering this score. So, yeah, overall, I guess they have an overall score, but like I said, I don't take this as the law and like, oh, if you have a bad score, that it's not going to work out. I have seen all kinds of situations where, you know, couples will last with a bad score for eternity. Well, not eternity, but you know what I mean, their whole lives. So, it's overall not great, not terrible. There are some aspects that are challenging, and then there are aspects that are positive. So, yeah, this has been pretty much my analysis. I, again, would love to pat you on the back, but in my absence, please give yourself a pat on the back for having listened to this entire video. So thank you so much for for listening all the way through. I also want to mention to the people who are watching this video, because this is my plan. I had a plan for this week, and I swear it is not going well. Because as usual, stuff gets in the way of me doing astrology. I do not get enough time to do astrology, nowhere near as much as I would like. But my plan is I want to post the part 2 of the video that I posted last week of Ninth Lord through the houses, the positive expression, and the next video that I'm going to post is the positive expressions of Ninth Lord through houses 8 through 12. So I hope to post that this week, hopefully. If not, it's going to be next week. All right. Another part of my plan is actually to do, speaking of the devas, there is this spontaneous inspiration that I had a few days ago about Revati. And there's this short video that I want to make about Revati, discussing some patterns that I have noticed with them. And yeah, this is like the plan was I was supposed to do this week, so I don't know. I'm gonna try this, but I'm not gonna promise. But anyway, with respect to the topic of famous couples, Synastry, or any other topics that maybe you really want to see, except for the series that I know I have to finish, which I have not forgotten about. Because I have a few of them going on. But aside from that, do you have any other topics or anything you would like to see on my channel? Please mention that in the comment section, so I will take that into account. Oh, I forgot to mention, the plan is also to do another members only video, at least one I had, again, for this week. But again, I cannot promise. Anyway, this has been the video. Thank you very much for listening. And as usual, if you have enjoyed the reading, the interpretation, right, please give it a thumbs up. And also don't forget to subscribe if you haven't subscribed to my channel. It is the easiest way to support me, and it is free. Again, also consider checking the membership introduction. There's an introductory video that I link in the beginning of each video, so you can watch that for more details. I will confess that I have gotten behind with the membership only videos, but there are a lot of videos in those playlists that I have already done, so you can check them out. You would have access to the ones that I have posted already. So go ahead and check out the introductory part if you want to see more about the membership section. Aside from that, of course, if you're interested in a private astrology reading, I do readings on all types of, well, almost all types of, areas of life. I do career, transits, spouse archetype, synastry, full synastry, surface synastry, all kinds of things. Arudha Lagna analysis. I even do things connected to fertility and children, what are children going to be like, etc., etc. So I have a bunch of them. I have created a list. And again, if you're curious to find out more about that, you can email me at the email address in the video description. I have mentioned this in other videos because some people have asked. I don't feel comfortable making the list of reading options and prices public just yet. Maybe I will when I have my own official website, but for now, this is how I do readings, basically through my email. What I can promise is I'm definitely not going to spam anyone, because I've had a few people ask me that. So no, I don't keep a log of the emails or anything. I don't send people any updates or anything. So I can promise if you're just curious, you can send me an email and I will respond, and that's it. So that's about the readings. And then, of course, last but not least, I have a tarot channel, which I have started a lot more recently than this one. and I will be linking it in the video description. If you're curious about tarot, go ahead and check it out. Maybe subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much for listening, and yeah, I hope to see you at my next video. Bye.